Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for those who are watching on YouTube, and thank you to those who are going to watch in the next coming days and weeks to hear about the community needs assessment here in Hopkinton. So we started this process over a year ago, and some of you have met our presenter today through focus groups and various interviews that she has conducted. She has worked very hard on putting together this community assessment, which is also available in its entirety on our website for those who want to view it. And we're going to go over some of the kind of key points today. So let's welcome Sue Berger.
Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me, or should I make sure I'm using this? Yeah, I'll try. Okay. Okay. I typically would be walking around in a crowd, but I'm going to stay here so that people online can also hear me as well. So I'll be here. Thanks for the introduction, Jessica. I'm part of a team of people who've worked on this report. My presence has been in Hopkinton and with Jessica and Amy, but it's really been a team effort that have worked on this report and put it together. And I'm going to share today what we did, the findings, and then some of the recommendations. But this is really a snapshot. I'm hoping to talk for maybe a half hour and then open this up to questions. Knowing me, I can talk for a straight hour, so I may try to go quickly through some slides than others, but the whole report is accessible, as is an executive summary online. They have a few copies here to look at, so I'm just going to show a snapshot. I'm going to reiterate that throughout, like when I talk about recommendations. These are just one or two of the recommendations from the report that I talked about. But before I start, I want to acknowledge, Amy just left, here she is, but I want to acknowledge especially Amy and Jessica for their support throughout. They've really been integral in promoting the project and getting people to participate in interviews and focus groups and getting people to complete the survey. So thank you very much. I know the board members, some of you who are here now, have been involved in the process and given feedback to Amy and Jessica. And then most importantly, all of the people who participated in the focus group, the interviews, and filled out the survey, because without the data, this report would really be nothing. Okay, so very briefly, and Jessica, I guess, introduced it a little bit, but throughout Massachusetts and really throughout the nation, the demographics are changing. That baby boom population is over 65 now. They're getting older, and they're a more diverse and different population with different needs. And so trying to figure out what those needs are and how to best meet the needs of this upcoming older population is really the purpose of this. And we did this needs assessment in conjunction with Hopkinton and the Gerontology Institute at UMass Boston to inform the Senior Center or Senior Services more broadly to guide their programming and services that they offer, to help and guide their strategic plan, to support work in the community. I know you're a dementia-friendly community, but you want to become age and dementia-friendly. And as importantly, to inform other departments within the town about the needs of seniors in Hopkinton and some recommendations, because a lot of the recommendations takes a village, and senior services can't do it alone. So I look to you when I say senior services, but it's obviously broader. So I'm going to start with just that Hopkinton is getting older. By 2030, it's projected that there's going to be 27% of residents will be 60, and actually, this is why I can't point here. I can't go like that, and pointing here won't work. But let's make sure the colors, they're a little different. So the top row, that light blue, are those 80 and older, and the yellow is those 60 and older. And as you can see, in 2010, there was about 13% of residents who were 60 and older, went up to 19%, and by 2030 it's projected to be 27%, and kind of staying flat through 2040 actually. That's a pretty significant increase in the share of people who are older. I don't need this. So what we do, I compiled a demographic profile using data from the US Census Bureau and the American Community Survey, some projection data, as you saw there, from UMass Amherst data files. We completed 4 interviews with someone from representatives from fire department, from the health department, and 2 representatives from the COA. We did 2 focus groups, one of stakeholders, one of residents, and I think it's worth noting that we tried to do a 3rd focus group trying to reach some people who aren't typically heard from, and unfortunately no one attended that focus group. And then we sent out a community survey. We sent out to everyone 55 and older. It was a little over 5,000 surveys that went out, and we got a 27% response rate. And when you send out a survey, 20 or 22% is considered good. This was a pretty strong response rate, and I give Jessica a lot of credit for that because she kept like plugging away and doing a lot to get people to fill that out. So let me talk about who responded to the survey. If you see on the bottom that it was at 27%, but if you look in the right-hand column, that's just a distribution, and it's a really nice distribution of the age range of people who filled it out. You'll see that we got 12 responses of people younger than 55, and that's because although we only sent it to people 55, it was available online as well, and 12 people younger than 55 filled it out. What else can I tell you about the people who filled it out? It was a decent distribution of men and women, a nice distribution of length of time people have lived in Hopkinton. The majority of people have lived there, 34% lived there 35 years or more, but that's not surprising when we're looking at people 55 and older, right? Like, so that distribution is a really nice distribution, and it's really nice that we had 10% of people less than 5 years, because you want to hear from everyone. Let's see if you can see it on yours. Oh, yeah, you can't, and I apologize for that. The employment status, most people were retired. This doesn't look great, but we have, again, a distribution of some people, of a fair number of people who were working full-time and part-time, and it's 44% working full and part-time. So let's talk about it, what we found out. For the older residents in Hopkinton, older residents staying in Hopkinton is really important as they age. I want to make sure you can see this. Yeah, okay. Can I do that? Yeah? Let's see. I'm a little nervous. There we go. Let's see. Yeah. Whoa.
Is that better?
Yeah. Not sure where I got. Yeah, a little preview. Okay. Can you see my pointer? Probably not. Okay. We're going to keep going with this. It's fine. But hopefully you can see that if you look at the top row, which is people 80 and older, 62% said it was very important, and 27%, so like 89, almost 90% feel like it's very important or somewhat important to stay in Hopkinton as they age. And even that's another 88% for those 70 to 79. So it's less important for the younger cohort. Maybe after their kids graduate from school, they're planning to leave, and it's not as important. It's not surprising, but it's just important to note that people want to stay in Hopkinton. So we asked people, what do they love about Hopkinton? The first 2 came out over and over again in focus groups and interviews, but also in the survey. Lots of comments about they love the space, the nature, the rural aspect of it, the walking and biking trails. But they also love the location, that they're an easy trip into Boston. So that rural area with access to the city came up over and over again. People also loved their neighbors and the people and the community. I will say, along with that, people also talked about the frustration that it's becoming less community. As it's becoming more commercialized, it's less tight-knit community. But that was something people really appreciated about Hopkinton. And also, there were a lot of comments about the town services and programs and the resources. These are just a few of the examples, but over and over again, people spoke highly, including about the senior center. One of the comments, I value the open space, having nature accessible, and the friendliness of people. So then we asked, what are their challenges? What are their top concerns? And I bet you none of these four will be a surprise to anyone here. I have some quotes to kind of highlight. And again, this was an open-ended question, and of the 1,400 people, I think 1,200 took the time to write a response. People in Hopkinton have a lot to say, and we inputted every single comment. And so these are just, I picked one comment from each thing. So the town's taxes are going up along with the cost of everyday living, and it's very hard to be so frugal on a very fixed income. Needing to rely on a car to leave town for restaurants, fresh produce, as well as a variety of shops will not be sustainable as an older person. The costs are rising and new construction is not senior-friendly. The ability to downsize to a senior-friendly home or condo barely exists. Being able to take care of my home, not being near help, and financial difficulty in moving to a smaller space. And then talking about the infrastructure, the traffic and poor management of construction decisions has made the center of town lose its sense of community. And continuing pressure on infrastructure, particularly water, caused by boom in home building. So those are just a few of the key comments related to cost of living, to transportation, to housing, and to infrastructure. Oh dear, so this is wrong. So there's two slides here, and let me just show you them. One, the top one is from the American Community Survey, which is part of the US Census data, and the bottom one is from the survey. And I was just trying to show you that we got a very good response of people who live alone who responded to the survey. So 18% of all ages of people who live alone responded to the survey, 36% of those 80 and older, and the one that you can't see is people 65 and older living alone, and it's 22% of the Census Bureau. So it's a really equivalent, and that's 65 and older. It's very possible, I don't have that data with me, that it's about 36%, showing that we got a good representation in the survey, and that also showing that a lot of people in Hopkinton who are older live alone, which really has implications for isolation and social participation, and implications for being able to maintain your home safely and stay there. So 60% of the respondents live in a place that doesn't have one floor living, which means that if you have mobility challenges, and these are, what did I say, 36% of people are 80 and older, you might have some mobility challenges. So we asked people, does your current residence have one floor living with a bedroom and bathroom on the entry level? And 60% said no, and then there's a breakdown of age. So it's not surprising that more of the younger people don't have, they're living in colonials or in houses that have two-floor living. But 37% of those 80 and older are living in a place that doesn't have entry or one-floor living. Worth noting. We asked an open-ended question, and again, about 1,200 people responded to challenges to staying in their current home. And this, again, was very similar to the challenges to living. And I just added a few more quotes here. Too large, my house and surrounding yard and property, too large to maintain. I plan to renovate my home and add a master bedroom on the ground floor. I suggest builders plan housing designs with master bedrooms on the ground floor so that elderly can age in place at their original family home. This one I bet a lot of people can relate to. When we moved here in 1989, we paid $3,200 a year in property tax. Now we pay $14,500. These massive increases are unsustainable in retirement. Remove the school portion from our property tax and we can afford to stay here. Need to drive to get anywhere, so if unable to drive, we'll lose access to services. And dealing with the uncertainties of aging, finding reliable assistance for various routine chores if and when needed. So these are just some examples of some of the challenges people anticipate as they age. Then we looked at transportation. So the yellow are those who don't drive. The light blue are those who drive with modifications so that they maybe don't drive at night, don't drive on the highway. Some people only drive with right turns, don't drive in cold or rainy or icy weather. And then the larger section are people that they drive with no limitations. Not surprising, that goes down. The right-hand side is those 80 and older. But people who responded, there's 21% of those 80 and older don't drive, or drive with limitations is another 25%. That's like almost half of the people who responded don't drive all the time, right? And even driving with modifications limits your ability to participate in evening events. It maybe means you're more isolated in the winter. And even those 70 to 79, 17% don't drive or drive with some limitations. So then we asked people respondents who missed or canceled or rescheduled a medical appointment due to lack of transportation. And by driving status, clearly and not surprisingly, some people who drive might have missed an appointment. They were sick or whatever, 2%. But 27% of those who don't drive and 12% who drive with limitations had to cancel or reschedule a medical appointment. All of these have implications for aging in place. We asked some people about health or their ability to engage in the community due to health. So the percentage of respondents who have challenges with community participation. So that orange line, the top line, are those who require help with activities around the house. And the bottom lines, those who have a condition that limits their community participation. And again, it's about, for those, again, this curve is a very expected and common curve. So we asked questions about substance use and about suicidality, as mental health challenges are a concern for older adults nationwide. This is the percentage of people who have been or have family or friends who have been affected by substance use. Not surprisingly, the number has gone down with age, but still a significant number of people. The next one is people, have you ever committed suicide? And although it's only 3% of people who responded, 3% is about 43 people of this survey. That's a lot of people who have considered or attempted suicide. And then a larger percentage, 13%, are those who are close to someone who has considered or attempted suicide. Doesn't mean that someone is in Hopkinton, but the person in Hopkinton is still dealing with that, and that their family or friend. We asked about caregiving. Do you now, or have you in the past 12 months provided care? Everyone has provided care, or a significant portion of all ages, including people who are 80 and older and maybe need care themselves, are providing care. And we asked how challenging it was. A few people do say it was easy, but the majority of people, I think it was 80%, found it very or somewhat challenging. And then we ask about social activities. And I just want you to look at this, how often people get together, either in person, talk on the phone, or email. And if you look at the top row of getting together in person, that's where I'm concerned, that there's 26% of people who get together in person with someone monthly or less. And then 6%, so it's really 32%. And you worry about social isolation with that. And in the report, it's all broken down by age as well. Would you ask a neighbor for help if you needed assistance? Oh, and the percentages aren't here. It's just the formatting that's up there. I don't have it. I probably do have it here. But more were yes, but that's probably about 40% said no, they wouldn't ask someone for help. And what was it? You have it there. Okay, so 33% said that they wouldn't ask someone for help. But do you provide help? 46% said no, but they'd be willing if asked. So I think it just shows that neighbor-to-neighbor relations can be a support and a help, but it requires people a willingness to ask. Figuring out a way to make that connection so that people are comfortable asking for help. We asked about sense of inclusion, and we had a few questions related to this. There was one question, have you ever felt excluded in Hopkinton based on cognition, on disability, on race, on cultural belief, on age, income, etc. And while the majority people felt a sense of belonging, 22% felt excluded based on at least one dimension. And then when we asked how much they agree with the statement, Hopkinton town government considers the interests and concerns of older residents, because that's another way where a lot of, came out in focus groups as well, where people felt like Hopkinton doesn't necessarily value the older adults. And it's just worth noting that 36% didn't agree, strongly disagree, or disagree with the comment that town government considers the interests of older adults. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the senior center. I'm cognizant of the time. This is the participation in the senior center. It goes up with age, not surprisingly. That's kind of a good thing. This is fine percentages, but then when you look at how the frequency of participation at the senior center, and that the majority of people, 55%, attend just a few times a year for special events only. So again, figuring out a way to get people here more than just a few times a year for the special event. This is why people limit their use of programs in the two columns, the users versus non-users, but the things I highlighted, non-users say that they're not old enough, so 32%. And I just think that's worth noting that the majority of people here were 55 and older, and the majority were 60 and older. People even who are 80 plus, some people responded they're not old enough, because people see a senior center as you need it versus want to attend. It's worth noting that 17% acknowledge that they don't know what's offered, or that they're not, and then people weren't interested in the programs offered. And I point that out, you'll see how it relates to some of the recommendations later on. Other reasons why people limit this use of senior services, work and other activities occupy my time, but I could see using the center when fully retired with more time on my hands. Not ready for senior services, so what that ready means, I have no issues. Again, is that what the purpose of a senior center? I thought it was a private center, no idea it was for the public. And I want to acknowledge that I am sure that there has been lots of, I know, newsletters go out, all of this goes out, but it's important to realize that people perceive, this is how people feel, right or wrong, they feel like they didn't know about it. They clearly didn't. Programs end too early in the day. Wish some programs could be offered in the early evening. So then we looked at how people rated the programs, and these are all of the programs we had as options, and they were all rated. A lot of people valued, let's say, these are people who rated it as either very important or important. And I do have in the report based on user versus non-user status for more detail. But then we asked areas you'd like to see developed or expanded. And I only listed the ones that were 30% or more, but indoor and outdoor fitness programs were highly rated as wanting more. And the indoor fitness programs were more so by the older cohort, and the outdoor exercise programs were a little more by the younger cohort. But that percentage was high. These are percentages for all ages. And then communication. And I think that's goes to that question. I never knew the senior center was available for anyone. But this is the percentage of people who don't know whom to contact in Hopkinton, should they or someone in their family need help accessing social services, health services, or other municipal services. So even people 80 plus, now maybe they've never needed to, but you want them to know what they should do if they need to. So even 40% of those 80 plus don't know who to contact. We asked how people want to find out about information. And the Senior Center newsletter was highlighted both in the survey with comments, as people love the Senior Center newsletter. But I think it's worth noting that for the younger ages, town website, social media got more, and all the takeaway from this is you need to continue doing both, right? You want to reach everyone, so you need both social media and websites, and you need to continue with the senior paper copies. And then I wanted to mention financial resources. We never on a survey ask what someone's income is, but we have some proxy questions to get an idea of how people are doing. So in response to the question, I have adequate resources to meet my financial needs, including home maintenance, personal health care, and other expenses. 10% disagree or strongly disagree, and of those 80 and older, 15% disagree or strongly disagree. We asked the question of 36%, about home repairs. 36% of the people who stated that their home needs repairs, and of those 36, 29% noted they couldn't afford to make the repairs. And similar home modification, the 31% of people who said their home needs home modifications, things like grab bars and railings and adaptations, 22% noted they couldn't afford to make those changes. And then from the U.S. Census Bureau, the American Community Survey, you can see that those 65 and older, 18% are living under $25,000 or less, and what's that, 31% under $50,000 or less. So it's probably very hard to live in Hopkinton on less than $25,000 a year. This is from the American Community Survey also. Housing burden is considered if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing costs. And you can see the blue line, the top line, are people who live on less than $20,000 a year. And those people are spending much more than 30, or all of the people who own a home are spending more than 30% on their home. Just some data from the survey. Housing costs make up a significant share of monthly costs for older householders. And then at the end, we have an open-ended question, anything else you want to share? And again, I can't remember if this was 500 or more, but a lot of people took time to share some thoughts. And these were the categories. Many people suggested great programs and services, great ideas, and Jessica and Amy have the whole spreadsheet of all those ideas. I listed a few. So some more, they wanted more intergenerational active programming, a volunteer bank to contact isolated seniors, a leaf vacuum program where residents rake their leaves to the sidewalk and the town vacuums them. I want that. I was going to say, and I want that too in my town. Groups for LGBTQ plus communities. So, and this was really just a sampling. Have an open house reception for a lunch program at the senior center. I'd like to try it, but don't know what it's like. I've lived here for 15 years and lived in an over 55 community. I have never gotten any info on the senior services in this town. And I have a hard time believing that because I know that the newsletter is sent out to everyone 60 and older. Now, maybe they're 56, but you would think that other residents there. But it's someone's perception and they don't know about it for whatever reason. I don't consider myself old enough to need senior services. A lot of people say this. I think of those for folks in their 70s to 90s. Feel the center only caters to the elderly and not older seniors who think young? Excellent senior center caring staff. Would use it if programs were often on weekends when I'm not working. And I want to highlight, I'm talking about all the challenges, but people gave lots of great comments too about what they love about the senior center and Hopkinton in general. So very quickly, before I take some questions and then go into recommendations, I just wanted to let you know most of that data was from the survey and the demographic profile, but the themes that came up from the focus group and interview are really already, I addressed it. So I'm just going to list them. The communication and collaboration could be improved, high cost of living, taxes, limited, affordable, sustainable, and subsidized and accessible housing, limited transportation options, making accessing services difficult, senior center's image as a place for residents who need help. Many older residents are struggling with physical, mental, and/or cognitive challenges. It can be difficult to get neighbors and feel part of the community. Hopkinton older residents are viewed as an undervalued asset to the community. And then the one other one that came up from interviews in the stakeholder focus group is that additional staff is needed to meet the needs of current and future seniors. And people, the departments I interviewed, they too felt like it was that the senior center needed all the things that they suggested. You can't do it with limited staff, but they also wish they had more staff. Like there used to be a liaison from, I believe it was the police department, and positions have been limited and cut. So before I talk about recommendations, and I'm gonna really breeze through this, are there questions about the findings? Yes, Sam.
So I would think many of the senior concerns and senior survey results are similar for most every community that you do this type of survey. Seniors have issues with cost of living and housing and transportation. Are there two or three things that jump out at you that are different in Hopkinton from other similar communities?
There are things that came out stronger in Hopkinton than might have. Like you're right, taxes are everywhere. That's a concern. The limited housing options came out, and that's a concern everywhere, that people want to downsize. That came out a little bit stronger here than in some of the other towns that we've done. Communication came out strong, and that again is a challenge in every town, but I think that came out stronger here. The need yes, that you're doing a lot of things, people don't know about things. Even in the stakeholder focus group, someone would mention something and someone said, I didn't know, these are employees, right? So communication with residents and among employees of the different things that are going on. Communication, let me just think for one. And I guess the other piece that comes out, but the neighborhood connection kind of piece, that people don't necessarily know neighbors, and that's not that surprising in a place where houses are larger, where there's more space. People may be going through garages, they don't get to know their neighbors, but they're not, that the lack of willingness to ask your neighbor, that's a little, not that other towns I haven't seen that. Yeah. It's a good question. I'd have to think a little more about that. But. Okay, let me breeze through these recommendations and then I'll take any kinds of questions you want. So I started with communication because I think, and after talking to Amy and Jessica, I think that's the overarching challenge because there are great programs and services in Hopkinton, but people don't necessarily know about it, or they misunderstand it, or they're somehow not getting that word out. And so I talk about both among residents and among departments. And so again, these are just samplings of some suggestions. Possibly embed senior center staff or volunteers in different organizations, cultural groups, and special interest groups, because word of mouth and networking is probably the best way. We talk about the newsletter and we talk about all these things, but if someone gets an invite, a personal invite to come, they might be more likely to engage. But for communication also, if you embed someone in these groups, they can be that liaison. And possibly explore the creation of neighborhood networks or neighborhood liaisons to provide channels for word-of-mouth communication. And then possibly among town offices and organizations, there are a lot of collaborations, but enhance them, promote, do more of them, more projects with the library, with the police department, but even with organizations that you are less likely to have collaborations with. I think you do some with the school, but maybe more with the school and other organizations. And possibly a quarterly meeting. I know towns, this is where, if every organization could have a senior liaison, like wouldn't that be ideal, right? So that that's like them embedding their staff in the senior center. Financial insecurity is a concern for a significant population, part of the population, driven largely by taxes, cost of living, and housing. So continue, I know you have tax relief programs, but possibly expand the program. So increase eligibility by letting friends or family members do the tax work off as a proxy for the individual. Broaden the awareness. So some people didn't know there was a tax work-off program. Broaden that awareness, maybe put it in a flyer in the utility bill or advertise in the newsletter. Engage with local businesses and organizations to create senior discount programs. And consider, this is just one example, consider hosting a Cut the Cord program to help older residents figure out how to stream TV. And again, that's just one thing for financial security. Limited transportation options are a challenge that came out a lot. A lot of people are driving and they'd say, when I can't drive, I can't live in Hopkinton. So promote awareness. I know you have some transportation options, both you have a van, you do medical appointments, you have the Metro West, I forget the acronym for it, but the paratransit, right? But promote awareness of the transportation options and possibly advocate for extending routes, hours, and on-demand services. And here's the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. Host training sessions on how to use it. And again, those are just two small options. Opportunities to adapt current housing, downsize, and accessible housing is challenging. So consider hosting a housing choice program. So planning a seminar where you have real estate agents and developers and contractors share their perspective on housing options. Consider community partners who can support the creation of trusted plumbers, carpenters, electricians, so maybe a vetted list of people who could help. And then this is a big one, expand access and remove barriers to building accessory dwelling units in town. That came up in comments and with individual people, that there's a lot that you are allowed accessory dwelling units, but there's a lot of red tape to it. So possibly expand that or make it easier for people to do. And again, that's not something just the senior center, that's a town-wide initiative or project. Yes, so it can be in your garage, it can be a separate unit, but it's a zoning law, a zoning issue, yep. Many residents need support due to physical, emotional, and or cognitive conditions. So you have a great dementia-friendly community program training here, maybe expand it. One idea is advocate for local restaurant staff to gain training. There's lots going on. People raved about what you've already done. Continue to offer opportunities to establish mental health first aid training. It's similar to dementia-friendly training to support residents. Create a See Someone, Tell Someone campaign to encourage those who interact with residents to notify senior services staff of someone who's isolated or in need of support. And consider hosting a caregivers night out to provide caregivers an opportunity to socialize, maybe explore volunteer groups that could help with respite. That caregiver night out could be for the caregivers, but it could also be a way for senior center staff to know who's caregiving, right? And know who might need services. And then rethink the image of the senior center to reach a larger segment. So correct the misperceptions of who's eligible, maybe highlight current participants, some younger participants in the Hopkinton Independent. Target engagement efforts at new users, so send out a birthday card when someone turns 60, with some information about senior services. Consider changing the name. Now, I say consider. Some towns have changed the name from senior center to, Center for Active Living or a center. And I actually don't know the results if that's changed. People love it, but it's something to consider, right? There's lots of different options. And expand outdoor and indoor fitness offerings. More active programming is going to attract those who might not need services yet. And my final one is, oh, not my final one, I have two more. Programs and services are valued, some additional programs. So one can, do a buddy program, bring a buddy or a new member day, as that person said, I'm afraid to come. I don't know what's there. Have a way to engage people initially. Consider implementing a surrogate grandparent program. These are just some of the ideas that people suggested. Culturally themed meals as a way to bridge and celebrate cultures. And then the last one is just, there's lots of suggestions, and I get overwhelmed thinking about them. I can only imagine how, you can't do it all, right? And so you have to prioritize. So I know Jessica and Amy are using some of these to guide a strategic plan, and from there, you need to develop an action plan. What are you going to do, and what can you do with the manpower, or advocate for additional staff to help? So I talked for a long time. I want to acknowledge Caitlin Coyle, who isn't here, but is the director of the Center for Social and Demographic Research on Aging, and she has been very involved with this project throughout. And you're welcome to email me. I probably would be the better person, but myself or Caitlin, or you can call. We're happy to answer questions at any time. But for now, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I talked pretty quickly. That's okay. Go for it.
It's so
You have to break the ice. You have to break the ice.
I'll break the ice. So it's so great to have Elaine, our town manager, here to hear this. So when I read the report, I thought it was really well done, findings and the recommendations. But my question is, what has been successful with other towns in how they package this and then bring it to the funding organization, the town
Absolutely.
manager, the select board, through the budget process to get buy-in to spend more money?
Great. So,
Especially in Hopkinton, where we have this school budget where we're building like these gigantic new schools because our population has been moving. So there's going to be a lot of budget stress. So what are your recommendations for how to package this and sell it and promote it through the different town organizations to get everyone saying, yes, we have to do this?
right. And that's a great question. So we recently, within the past year, did what we called a look-back study. So the center has done about 70 plus, maybe 80 plus, of these needs assessments. They're all a little different. Some have surveys, some don't, whatever. But we contacted many of the towns to find out what are the outcomes, or is this just some paper, or has anything happened? And the biggest so that they use some of the data. That's actually surprising. I mean, some of the reports, some of the projects were very specific because the town was either thinking of building a new senior center or they were building one and they wanted specific ideas, and they took those ideas and used them and got the input from the town. But I would say the number one was using it for funding. So pulling some of the data out, there is, even the executive summary is, I think, too much to market, to send out, but to pull some of those demographics out showing that, we need it, or figure out what you want to do, what that action plan is, and then pulling the data specific to that to guide, to find some grants, or to get funding from the town. I can go back to that, yeah?
Real quick, hi, I'm Matt from HCAMCom. If anyone has any questions, just please stand up and speak as loud as you can. We don't have microphones in the audience.
Okay.
We just want to make sure the audience at home can hear everything that's going on.
And I will just repeat, that question was just how have other towns used the reports? But you had a question in the back?
Hi, my question was,
Can you stand up?
of course I'm going to
Yeah, of course. You can stay there.
my question is, could you speak to, like if you had in your head some flagship towns that seem to be really doing well with their senior services, managing the demand and planning, and then what degree, like what percentage of their operating budgets are they committing to that?
Yeah, so I probably,
The grant funding, that's great, but that takes additional staff.
right.
We're already stressed with staff, as you found. So.
Great question. So I'm going to just repeat the question and clarify if I didn't. can I think of flagship towns that are doing great? And for those towns, what percentage of their budget is for the senior center? Is that correct? Okay. I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to that. We might be able to find that out, like what percentage it is. I can think of some of the flagship towns, some of the things that they're doing well that have gotten a lot more people there is more active programming. That's not unique to here. Like the biggest thing that people are doing that has made a difference is that they're targeting this new 60-plus generation that's more active than 60-plus 20 or 30 years ago, right? So some places have put in pickleball courts. And I'm not saying that. I can't remember. I don't think that came out loud and clear here. In some towns it has. But more, say it again? Parks and Rec took care of that here, okay. But more active programming and somehow getting that image out. Some towns have changed names. I'm not sure if that's what changed the image, but to making it a place for active living, not a place where you go if you need help. And that's how people think of it. And so to engage more people. But I don't know and those are the flagship ones that people talk about all the time and rave. It's a really active, dynamic environment with lectures and fitness classes and all sorts of things. I don't know the percentage of the budget. Yeah. It's a great age to be.
And that being said, so the opposite side of that is the things that you spoke to, which is the disability, the illnesses, the isolation. So how do you balance that? And again, I'll go back to these are services. It takes someone to perform the services. So how is that balancing out, or what have you seen that's worked?
Right. So the question is, how do you balance that active engagement and getting all these young people with a lot of what we talked about is a lot of people need help and need services and need maybe in-home help and have disability and caregiving, and how do you balance it? So the challenge is balancing it financially, right? Because it takes staff and it takes people. I think you don't want to get rid of what you're doing, like to meet those needs, the outreach that happens, all of the services that go on were rated highly, or at least by a certain percentage of people. You don't want to eliminate that because you want a senior center for older adults who need that help. But you really want other people to get involved so when they need the help, they'll be comfortable coming here. Because some people don't come to a senior center when they really need it because they don't know about it or they're intimidated. So if you can get people comfortable coming to a place when they're younger and they see it as a friendly place and they know the people, they're going to then have that access when they're in need of services. The challenge is finances, and that's, right, the challenge is having the staff to do it all. Sally?
My question goes back to the beginning, and as you think about the towns that have been successful, and you've given this report to them, how does the town then, what's the next step in terms of who in the structure, the current structure of this town would take this information and form some sort of a plan, a priority? I'm not sure that we have any structure right now to do that. What happens in other towns?
So the question is, what do you do with the report? What's the next step to get it to the next level? Is that correct? And so typically the next step is to develop from this an action plan. Usually the senior services, the Council on Aging, the board, whatever, develops an action plan from this. I will say that sometimes the center in Boston, for example, the Gerontology Institute has gone back in and done action plans with the town, but developed an action plan and then figured out how to implement the action plan. If it needs more money, if it needs more people, or some of the things are low-hanging fruit. So there are definitely some items on this list and recommendations that you might get big bang for your bucks without needing a lot of extra money and staff.
Would seem to me that a big part of this is identifying the resources that already exist and pulling them together for effective communication, because I think there's a lot going on in this town. But the right hand, as you said, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And that's been a problem for a long time.
Right, and so someone she was just commenting that that not everyone knows what the other person is doing, so kind of coordinating the services might be a first step.
Do you have any recommendations? Yeah, I was gonna ask the same question as Sally did. Now that it's here, when we're gonna try to promote it, is there a vehicle that's better than others besides, you said email and, things like that? Do you
Yeah.
have to do it after you play it first, or
Right.
is it a presentation at the selectmen's meeting, or something, or whatever? If we decide to do something for more funding, maybe an article at town meeting and then explain it on the town meeting floor, what works?
So the question is, what works to get the word out and to spread the information, like that next step? So the one thing that has been shown to work is targeted marketing. So like, if you're putting something on social media, you're going to have a different kind of ad or marketing than you might in the newsletter, because anticipating that a younger cohort is going to hear it. Or if you aiming for caregivers, that message is going to be different. How you get it to people is challenging, right? And I think, one person in one of the focus groups suggested a sandwich board in downtown with the sign, because people drive through downtown. The takeaway from the many suggestions to me was that multiple modes of communication are needed. And clearly, no matter how many ways you communicate, some people aren't going to hear it, right? And I think some of that is with today's age, is information overload. So you get an email and you don't read it, right? We're all guilty of that, I'm sure, because there's so much. So there's not one right answer that I know of. We've done community forums. I don't know in Hopkinton if that's a better, or what kind of response you get. Going to the select board is one way. This is going to be accessible. The town has these slides. You can do a mini 10-minute thing that maybe people will read and pull out the two things or whatever. But I'm not sure what's best for Hopkinton. Different towns have done different things. That's okay, I'll repeat your question. I made you stand up. Okay, you have to stand up, sorry.
We have such a, there's with 27% or however many people were considered seniors. To me, there's such a disproportionate number of resources going for senior services in town. And I don't know how to compete with that, when you don't have enough staff. The amount of direct services that are provided here, I don't know how people free themselves up to pay for, to write a grant. I don't know who else does that, because the rest of the people that can do it are volunteers, like the COA board and things. So how do you change that a little bit when you have a town that has that the schools are, we're number one, we're in the state and blah, blah, blah. But if you look at that data, which is really, I think, very telling, it's very disproportionate, the number of resources that are going, the amount of resources. How do you move on from that? I think it's a staffing issue, but I don't know how you get beyond that.
Yeah, so that's a great question, in that it's clear that the percentage of older adults is increasing, the share of older adults in Hopkinton is increasing, and yet the budget, you still have the majority of the money going to schools and then to town resources, which are for everyone, but such a small percentage, and that's across Massachusetts, such a small percentage goes to senior services. I'm going to follow up with my team and see if they have brilliant ideas of advocating. And, you know, maybe some of this data can be presented and there can be a way to use it to get more money from the town, not just for grants. I mean, that would be my hope.
Can I follow up without standing up?
This standing up is a hard thing. I'll stand with you. No.
27% of people and seniors, then every one of those 27% who are able should be better advocates. Because the PTA or whoever else, I mean, I don't know what it is now anymore, I was very involved when my kids were younger, but now that I'm a senior, whoever part of that 27% that are using services or could use services, what percent, they should all be talking about it in their neighborhoods and in their groups, and we all need to do a better job and take responsibility for it.
Of advocating for yourself. So the comment was all of those 27%, and you're not yet at 27%, so you're probably at 23%, right? Anyone who's able should be advocating for your needs, and I think that's a great idea. One of the challenges is that at town meetings, which are often in the evening, that it's, again, not making it accessible to older adults when they're voting for senior issues or, you know, things that might benefit. So another possibility, and some towns have moved their town meetings to weekends or to earlier, you know, and there's a lot of challenge with that. But like sometimes older adults want to be civically involved, but there's too many barriers for that. But I think that's a great idea. Yep, another one.
Besides, you know, people are living, I live very differently than my mother and father did. And you know, I'm still working part-time and I'm almost 70, which is why I'm not standing up. So a greater percentage can commit to coming to a 6 o'clock meeting
Right.
than we're used to. They should just be doing it.
They st-
We're trying a little bit hard too. I just think that's part of the whole thing.
Right. And just saying that a lot of those 27% or 23% can go to evening meetings and should advocate. And I'm all with you. And maybe, you know, the town meetings that happen that have bills or things to vote on that are relevant, that the town can put them earlier in the meeting, and that the senior services can advertise, let's get everyone to go to the meeting, let's do a van, you know, whatever. But you might be able to go, but some people maybe don't want to drive at night. All those, right, there are all of those challenges. I'm cognizant of the time. I'll take one more, I can stay, but I'll take one more question. Yeah?
I just have a question. What percentage of senior centers in Massachusetts run programs on the weekends? That are open on weekends? And when you're talking about socialization, weekends are very hard, not just for seniors, but for people that have lost loved ones or divorced, whatever, family issues. I'm just curious as to how many places.
So that's a great question, and I will get back to you. So the question is, for those who couldn't hear, because I didn't ask you to stand, is that what percentage of senior centers are open on weekends? Because that is a challenging time for a lot of older adults who might be widowed, who live alone, for whatever reason. And I don't know that answer. I know that some senior centers are opening, they're having later hours, like so 3 or like 4 o'clock kind of events. Used to be it would end at 3 o'clock, but that's more to reach those people who might be working or working part-time and can get there. I don't know about the weekends, and I will get back to you, or get back to Amy and Jess. Right, but, right. I don't have my pen. I'm going to write it down as soon as I'm done to remember, and Jessica and Amy will get back to you.
One of the towns I've been in that does a good job at that is Harwich, because they have their senior center and their community center co-located in the same building. So where does senior services end and community services begin? You can't tell. So they have pool tables and a workout gym and an exercise area that everybody can use.
Lexington has,
Like a Nirvana situation where you have one building that can service everybody.
and then you can share resources as well. Yes. So,
We need to build a community center next to
the comment was that Harwich has a community center and a senior center that are one, kind of connected, and so they can share resources and they can be open on the weekend when maybe there's community activities going on, but people can use the pool table and just the area to socialize.
So just to follow up on that, I'll stop monopolizing. I'm sorry, but it just makes me think of like blue zones and places where we don't isolate our seniors, that we make them a part of our community, that it is, part and parcel, whatever the phrase is. Like, seniors are just as much a part of our community as kids are, as I am, as anyone is. And so I think if we integrate, instead of putting everyone in their own little box all the time, then it makes it more natural for us to reach across generations and social barriers. I mean, one of, frankly, the best things that has happened to me since I have lived in this town is becoming the public health nurse. Because I got to meet all sorts of people that I would not have met having not grown up here because of the fact that I was busy with kids and that. And so I think when we start thinking strategically in our plan or however that goes, if we start to remember that we are a community at the heart of it, and we integrate all of our activities, that might do something to decrease isolation, improve efficiency across departments, and promote, a real sense of community and belonging to all of our residents.
So I'm going to just repeat the comment because you didn't stand up. No, just giving you a hard time. I just want to repeat the comment, though, and I think it's a really valid comment, that to remember that you're a community, young and old, and building off of the previous question, the benefit of having things that are shared, because there's just a more of a give and take. And it did come out a lot of suggestions, both I remember in one focus group, but also in the survey, suggestions for more intergenerational activities, which is another just example of being one. Are you okay with me? Yeah? Okay, go ahead.
I think one of the things that we might want to think about, and it may sound basic, but we pride ourselves on, having this great school system. We need to go above that. We want to pride ourselves on being a great community for everybody. And I know several times, and I don't remember who it was, but several times in the past couple of years, right in the paper, like when there was going to be a storm or something like that, it would say, remember to check on your senior neighbors. And I remember being in a position of calling people to check on them and having people call me to check on me. And you met more neighbors that way. And I think if we kind of elevate to, let's be the #1 community with all these great things, that might be a nice campaign way to get people more involved.
So a suggestion, just saying, currently you're known for a great school system in Hopkinton, but you should try to be known for a great community and elevate to above just a great school system. Great comment. Yeah, Sally?
I just have, I will stand up, so
Great.
you don't have to repeat it, but we have a current issue that's hit the town where we have volunteers who were working on a program to get a tax relief of income on their property tax. So I'm wondering if you have any data in all of your towns about the kinds of work that volunteers are doing in their town which qualifies for this tax abatement program that's a state-run program.
Right. We may, because we have some data from like a survey that we did of multiple senior centers. I saw, Jessica, you're writing that. Can you write that note down for me too? Is finding out the data of what's acceptable and what kind of work other towns are allowing people to do for the tax relief program. And I don't know that answer. Great question. And you had a question.
I just want to say that I think one of the biggest problems that we have here is, I am part of the Friends of the Seniors. And we could probably fund many of these things for, we're fortunate to be able to do that. But the problem is, we don't have the staff to be able to do it. People have been very generous to the center through
Right, yeah, right, right. I should have put that recommendation first. And so the comment was for the Friends has funds to maybe support and help with a lot of these programs, but all the programs need staff, and the Friends, a 501(k) cannot support a staff, right? The discussion is great. I'm not surprised that people are engaged. I think that's great. I hope that this report then isn't the end, and that it's the beginning of the next step of whatever you choose to do with it. But I hope it doesn't go in the back of a drawer, and that the data is used. Nancy? You can get a pass from standing.
I actually, Nancy Raw, I'm a member of the Council on Aging Board, and I live at senior housing, which is walking distance from here. So my parents lived there originally years and years ago, and when I moved in, say 20 plus years ago, everybody knew everybody. It was a different kind of community, and people, and the senior center was just starting to get rebuilt, a new one, as opposed to the small one that they had down in the basement of the town hall. So when the new center was built, all these people would come up and have lunch. It was just wonderful. And as years went by, these people passed on, and so new people moved in. And now the senior center, the housing has a different clientele of residents who live there. And I know they all get the Hopkinton,
The Hilltopper, yeah.
so these people, I don't know, I mean, I don't get around that much anymore, so I really don't know who they are, and how do we get them involved? I don't see any of the new people coming up here. In fact, tomorrow, there's a coffee hour, and two outreach workers, Julia and Kim, are gonna be at the community building and gonna speak about the senior center and what they offer. So hopefully there's a good turnout. But we usually have, like, at our board meetings, because I'm also a member of that board, there'd be a whole audience there. Now, there might be one person, and it's not the same. So, and I know the senior center is trying to get their hardest to get those people up here, but now a lot of them are younger and they're working, and they all have cars, most of them. So there's probably out of 92 units, I would say maybe 10% or so come up here, and others only, they get the Hilltop. I don't understand, do they just throw it away or not eat it? Or, like, I myself can't go around and knock it at the door
Right.
to say, you need to try to get there. And there's
But-
also, we have transportation for the ones who don't. And the same people who are still alive from years ago, they're the ones who use it. There's a few of them that I know still alive. But it's so different than it was years ago. And I don't know how to help or,
So,
what to do or get them up here.
So I have one suggestion, but I'm just going to repeat, just talking about the 55-plus community that is walking distance from the senior center, but it's changed in that many people are younger and not younger than 55-plus, but younger and are still working and driving, and so used to be much more collegial, and a very small percentage use the senior center. And I would say that, you have a handful, 10% who use the senior center. If each one of those 10% knocked on one person's door, like somehow that word of mouth, if you got one person to come here and someone else got one person, it might slowly change. But it is hard, and if someone's younger and still working and driving, they maybe get their needs met at other places, right? Like, it's not that they have to need it, but maybe, it's not like everyone has to come here. You don't want everyone to come here. You'd really be overwhelming them. But if you got a few more people here.
I'm hoping that tomorrow, with the discussion that Kim and Julia here, that, because usually it's a good turnout. It's usually a coffee hour the day after the board meeting, so tonight is the board meeting. And so tomorrow will be a coffee hour that Julia and Kim will be at. That's when the people tend to go to more.
Uh-huh.
Hoping that when they listen to the two outreach workers, that they'll learn more about what the senior center does, and that's their object.
That's the object, absolutely.
Is to
And that it's open to anyone, yeah. I appreciate you all staying engaged. Please feel free to email me. That's not a direct line to me, but I will get a message and can contact someone back if you want to call, if you're more comfortable calling. Or give Amy or Jessica, they will get in touch with me if you have any questions. But I will answer those questions, and somehow Jessica will get it back to you. Thanks. And it looks like there's a lot of cookies there, so I think that people should grab a cookie to go. Am I right?